Welcome, everyone. As we are sponsored this evening by Shalom Fogel, Lila Nishmas, Yaakov Zev ben Yehuda Aryeh, Rivka bas Yaakov Yosef, Tzivya Miriam bas Gad, and Yosef ben Sion ben Yaakov Zev. And we are sponsored in loving memory of Yaakov Chaim ben Abba, Esther bas Gittel, Avram ben Shmuel HaKayin by Baruch Ian. As we just mentioned, Baruch Ian's sponsorship, Yaakov Yamansky, with our Kursa Tov to the Rav, a Zoom family, and Nachas from children and grandchildren. A.B. Spry also from Nachas from children and grandchildren. Ed Saleh from London, and Joshua Rosenberg of Virtual Talmud. We are holding on this beautiful Monday evening, we are holding on the top line of Daf Samach Beis Amud Aleph, top line, picture night tonight. A lot of pictures here. As we welcome in Saba joining us, and we welcome in Avram Chavin and Michal Avram Chavin and Rich Leonard and Ruvain Shannet. We welcome in Elliot Udell and Aaron Swade, who's with us from vacation, and Chaim Kramer. We welcome in Yitzi Fuchs, Baruch Ian, Yisrael Fisher, Shalom Fogel, and there's Mark Frankel, Avram Rezepkowitz. Mark is tuning in from the kitchen tonight. Yeshua Shmuel, Rabbi Kranz, Yitzi Muller, David Helfgott, on Kol Lashon. Here comes Ruvain Pollack joining us. Now,
I'm going to send the envelope of Rabashinsky to you on Wednesday. It goes up.
Okay. We welcome Ruvain. So, what happens over here, if you look at the right side, the first picture in Rashi, what happens is over here is Ruvain is selling a piece of property to Yisrael Fisher. And Ruvain writes a full boundary on the two sides, and he writes a long boundary on the bottom, but a short boundary on the top. So the Gemara says, Meitzer loy meitzer echad aruch. He makes one long boundary, that's the boundary on the bottom. Or meitzer echad kotzer. And he makes one short boundary. So the Gemara says that we could only go with the short boundary, tefasta meruba loy tefasta, tefasta mu'at tefasta, and therefore Yisrael Fisher only gets the small closed rectangle from the short boundary down to the bottom. He doesn't get the long boundary. Says the Gemara, loikana ela keneged hakotzer. And we say, why did he make the long boundary on the bottom? Meitzer hirchav loy. He only made it lengthy on the bottom because the only boundary he knew on the other side was further away. In other words, the boundary on the other side that gives you the dimensions of the rectangle was further away. And we say he just, one boundary he made wider. Meitzer hirchav loy. Says the Gemara, but we have another explanation. And that is maybe he gave him a diagonal, as you see in the second picture. The reason why he said made one border short and one border long is because he's giving him a diagonal from the short border till the long border. And he's giving it the entire area inside And that's why he did it that way. And a diagonal is called, in Gemara terminology, Rosh Tar. Rosh Tar is the head of an ox, which is wider on one side and narrower on the other, and therefore that's called a diagonal. So says the Gemara, they asked Rav, Amru le Rav Kahana v'Ravasi l'Rav, maybe he made one border long and one border short, the Yikna Keneged Rosh Tar, and he should get a diagonal, like in the second picture. So Shasik Rav was silent, and the Rashbam says Raz was silent in admission that this is a good explanation. Umayda Rav himself is in agreement even before he made this, even before he acknowledged the pshat. Umayda Rav echad de'ika meitzer Ruvain v'Shimon mechad gisa, umeitzer Levi v'Yehuda mechad gisa. If there's the border of Ruvain and Shimon on one side, and Levi and Yehuda on the other side. And what he did was, in other words, you have Ruvain and Shimon on the top. Now look at the third picture. Ruvain and Shimon on the top, and Levi and Yehuda on the bottom. And he said Ruvain and Shimon on the top, and only Yehuda on the bottom. So, Omoida Rav, Eicha De'ika Meitzer Ruvain v'Shimon Mechad Gisa, where on one side you have Ruvain and Shimon, Omeitzer Levi Yehuda Mechad Gisa, and Levi Yehuda on the bottom. Levi was opposite Ruvain, and Yehuda was opposite Shimon. And on the top, he said the border is Ruvain and Shimon, and on the bottom, he said the border is Yehuda. There, even Rav is minded that it must be a diagonal. Why? Because if he only meant a rectangle, then he should have said either from Shimon to Yehuda, or if he wanted the rectangle on the other side, he should have said from Ruvain to Levi. Either the Ruvain Keneged Levi or the Shimon Keneged Yehuda, if he wanted to give just a rectangle. He wrote Ruvain and Shimon on the top and Yehuda on the bottom. It must be Shmamina Keneged Rosh Tar Damalei. He was saying a diagonal. Now, as we welcome in Mel Zachter, people are arriving very slow this evening, and remember
Wasn't there a different term that they used for diagonal when we were learning Eruvin?
Alachson.
Right. Okay.
Both are used. Okay, now we have Mark back in the dungeon, okay, if you're just joining us in process, and remember what I say, my motto is, you come whenever you can, except for Marshall, who's very makbid on time, who has to be here 5 minutes before the year. But everybody else could come whenever they want. The only person that complains about the time has to be here always on time. Now, the Gemara says, hearty appetite, Marshall. Now, as we welcome in Gedalia Engel for our 23rd Zilmer of this young evening, and welcome Gedalia, as we are in process. We're holding 5 lines from the bottom of Daf Samach Beis Amud Aleph. Now, the next picture is the 4th picture from the top. Now, here you have where Ruvain is the border on the top and the bottom, and Shimon is the border on the right and the left. So if he says if Meitzer Ruvain was Mizrach U'Marav, the land was bordered by Ruvain on the east and the west, and the Meitzer Shimon Safon V'Darim, and it's bordered by Shimon on the north and the south, or Ruvain on the on the bottom and the top, and Shimon on the right and the left. And here, Reuven is selling a parcel of land to Yisrael. It wouldn't be enough to say land bordered by Reuven and Shimon. Because if he says land bordered by Reuven and Shimon, he might be selling him only half of the parcel. Because as you see the line bisecting it diagonally, he could have meant half of the field, which is bordered by Reuven and Shimon. So if he wants to sell him the whole field, tzarich lemichtav lemeitzer Reuven ruchin train, it's bordered by Reuven on two sides, on top and bottom, or meitzer Shimon ruchin train, and it's bordered by Shimon on two sides. Because if he doesn't say that, he just says bordered by Reuven and Shimon, he might mean only half of it, because half of it is also bordered by Reuven and Shimon. Ibayelu. Now the Gemara is going to look into three cases which is not so clear. Sayim lo yesakronois mahu. If you look at the picture that's black, the only picture on the page that's black, so he tells him the land that has Reuven on the corner, Shimon on another corner, Levi on the third corner, and Yehuda on the fourth corner. So he demarcates the four corners. Do we say he's selling him whatever is in the corners? Or do we say he's only selling an X, a diagonal from Reuven to Yehuda and from Shimon to Levi, and not the whole field? So if he marks off the corners, what's the din? Kimin gam mahu. What about the Greek letter gamma? He marks off two corner brackets, as in the picture to the left of the X and underneath it. He makes two corner brackets on the two opposite sides of the field. So do we say, since he marked off a section of all four sides, he means to give him the entire contents? Or do we say it's only a full diagonal, a wide diagonal going from one bracket to the next bracket, as you see in the bottom picture? Finally, as we turn to Daf Samach Beis Amud Beis, finally, b'seirugin mahu. Seirugin means every other one. This is a field that's bordered by 8 people. So, and he tells Yisrael, as he sells it to Yisrael, he tells him every other border. Look at the picture to the left. He says, I'm selling you the land opposite Reuven, the land opposite Levi, the land opposite Yisachar, and the land opposite Yosef. Now, starting from Yosef, he tells him Seirugin means every other one. So he marks off the boundary of Yosef, not the boundary of Binyamin, the boundary of Reuven, not the boundary of Shimon, the boundary of Levi, not the boundary of Yehuda. And in such a case, this art scroll doesn't make the picture this way. You see, according to Art Scroll's picture, here, according to Art Scroll's picture, it would be the boundary of Zvulun, not the boundary of Yisachar, and then the boundary of Yosef. In other words, here in the Artsco picture, we have two lands next to each other. Yosef, in the Gemara's picture, we have the two lands, Yosef and Yisachar, next to each other, and the two lands not given, Yehuda and Zvulun, next to each other. That's a very questionable picture. Let me see if the Artsco mentions that. Yeah, the picture inside the Gemara is a very questionable picture. If you look at the diagram in the art scroll, right? A he demarcates, and G he demarcates, E he demarcates, and C he demarcates. So that's every other one. So now, do we say, again, that since he gave him 4 borders on the 4 sides, he meant to sell him the entire contents? Or do we say that he meant to give him only every other triangle? So he meant to give him the triangle, in the case of Artsgrove, he meant to give him the triangle that's opposite A, and opposite G, and opposite C, and opposite E. In other words, he's giving him half of the field. So, as we welcome in Rebbe Ilya Shutman, and Abe Arbach is joining us. So on all 3 of these shilas, the Gemara says teku. Tishbi Ataretz Kushas V'Bayis. And the Rashbam says, since it's a teku, so Hamoitzi Mechaver Olav Araya, and therefore Yisrael can only take the smaller amount from Marshall, because Marshall is the muzik, so Hamoitzi Mechaver Olav Araya. Now, new case. You have a field that is bordered on 4 sides. And when Marshall sells it to Yisrael, Meitzer loy Meitzer Rishon, he tells him the border on one side, or Meitzer Sheni, the border on the second side, or Meitzer Shlishi, and the border on the third side, but Meitzer Revi loy Meitzer loy. He doesn't give him the 4th border. Now, you would say, why does he have to give him the 4th border? If you have 3 sides, so we know that everything in those 3 sides he's selling. Why does he have to give a 4th border? So Amar Rav, Kona Kol Yisrael gets the entire contents, which is in these 3 borders, Chutz Memeitzer Revi. He doesn't get the thin boundary on the 4th side. That's why he leaves out the boundary. Remember, we said the boundary is a raised area of land. He left out the 4th boundary, so he doesn't get the area of the 4th boundary. Shmuel says, Afilu Meitzer Revi. He even gets the 4th boundary, because why did he need to say it? Since he said all 3 sides, we could figure out the 4th side. Rav Asi says, you know why Marshall left out the 4th boundary? Because he didn't want to give him the interior at all. He just wanted to give him the narrow strips around the 3 sides. Boy, that's something. Rav Asi Amaloi Konel Telem Echad, he only gets 1 furrow al Pnei Kula, running around the 3 sides. Sovelak Rav, he holds like Rav Damash Yurei Shair, that he left out the 4th boundary because he was leaving something for himself. Or Midashaya B'Meitzer, just like he kept for himself the 4th border, Shair Nami B'Kulu. He also kept the entire contents of the area, and he only sold them the 3 boundaries. Amar Rava. Rava says, Hilkasa, Marshall, we're not going to let Marshall pull that one on Yisrael. Hilchasa, Konakol, Yisrael gets the entire interior of the 3 boundaries, Chutz Memeitzer Revi, except for the 4th boundary, that raised boundary he doesn't get. V'loy Amran ela d'loy mivla. That's only if the 4th boundary wasn't absorbed within the 3 boundaries. Now you could see that idea in the picture. See the picture of the two U-shaped three boundaries. So in the event that V'loy Amron, that Yisrael doesn't get the fourth boundary, Ella Deloy Mivla, where the fourth boundary is not absorbed in the three. That's the picture to the left. Aval Muvla, but if the fourth boundary is absorbed in the U of the three boundaries, Kana. And V'chiloy Muvna Lami, and even if it's like the picture to the left, where it's not absorbed, where there's a row of palm trees, or Vave Tishakavin, or it was kosher that it has 9 kav. So then we would say that Marshall kept it for himself. But if there's no row of palm trees on it, or it doesn't have 9 kavin, then even if it's not absorbed, Kana Yisrael gets it. Where it's absorbed inside, like the picture to the right, then Yisrael gets it, even if there's a row of palm trees, and there's 9 kavin, Kana. Now there's another version over here. Ikadamre, others say, if I could trouble you, this with ice. Ikadamre, please. Ikadamre, there's another version over here. Amar Rava, again, Hilchas HaKanako, the halach is that Yisrael gets everything, even though Marshall did not say the fourth boundary. And he gets even the fourth boundary. That's only if it's absorbed in the three boundaries, like the picture on the right, where it's absorbed in the U of the three boundaries. Aval, thank you. If it's not absorbed, loikani. And even if it's absorbed, that's only if there isn't a row of palm trees and there isn't a 9 kav, which is the smallest share of a field. But if there's a row of palm trees, or there's 9 kav, then even if it's absorbed within the borders, like han. We could infer from this, if it's not absorbed inside, even if it's not kosher, it doesn't have a row of palm trees, it doesn't have 9 kav, since Marshall didn't say the fourth border, loikon. Now, here the Gemara does something very nice. It gives us a summation. First, the Gemara tells us the common denominator, what both versions agree upon. Remember, Marshall left out the fourth boundary when he was selling it to Yisrael. Shaminon mitravayu lishnei de Rava. We could conclude from both versions of Rava, even though he only said 3 borders, the interior of the field, he's not keeping anything for himself. In other words, it's clear that we don't paskin like Ravasi, that he's only selling him the 3 borders. No. B'shamina nami, dehecha de mivla, where the fourth border is absorbed inside the other 3, like the picture to the right, v'leka leirichba dedikla, v'le'avik tishakavan, and it's not choshev, there isn't a row of palm trees, and there aren't enough room to plant 9 kav. Kon. Yisrael gets it. Now here's where the also loy muvla, if it's not absorbed inside the U, the and there is either a hedge of palm trees on the fourth border or an area to plant 9 kav, and then everybody agrees loikon. Yisrael doesn't get it. What is the difference between the first version and the second version? The difference between the first version and the second version is 2 cases. Loy muvla, where it's not absorbed inside the ika leirichba dedikla, and there is on it a hedge of palms and 9 kav. Excuse me. No, I'm sorry, I skipped. The 2 cases are as follows. Muvla, where it's absorbed in the U, but V'ika alei, and there is a hedge of palms, or 9 kav, or loy muvla, it's not absorbed. It's outside, like the picture to the left. V'leka alei, and there isn't on it a hedge of palms, or 9 kav. One version says that Yisrael gets it. One version says he doesn't. So what do we do about those two cases? On that, the Gemara says, although normally, as the Rashbam says in such a case, we would say, Amoitzi mechaver olav araya, and Marshall has the upper hand since he's the mulzik in the field, and Yisrael is the moitzi. Here we say, and this is a tradition that's given down from the Ga'ainim, here we say, Shuda de Dainei. Here we say that we leave it up to the discretion of the judge. And the discretion of the judge means that the judges determine how generous Marshall is. Right? If he's mean, then he didn't give it to Yisrael. If he's generous, then he did. I'll leave it up to your imagination what you think. Now, as we welcome in Yisrael Meir Kaplan for our 28th Zoomer of the evening. And again, a reminder to everybody, you could come whenever you want, but remember that this week's start time is at 8:15. Now, Amar Rabbah. Now, this next Gemara shows you how fine is the fine print. Amar Rabbah. If Marshall says to Yisrael, Palga de Isli Ba'ara, the half that I own in this land, I'm selling you. Then Palga. Then he's selling him half. If he tells him Palga Ba'ara de Isli, half of the land that I have, since he has a half, and he's telling him half of the land that I have, River, he's only selling him a quarter. How do you like that? How do you like them apples? Huh? So now it's, the way I explained it, it's easy to understand. Let me go it over again. Marshall owns a half of a piece of land. So if he says, Palga disli ba'ara, half that I have in the land, Palga, he means to sell the half that he has in the land. Palga ba'ara de isli, but a half of the land that I have, so he means half of the half. So then he's selling a quarter. Now Abaya didn't look at it that way. Amalei Abaya, Maishnachi, what's the difference? In the first case he says, Palga disli ba'ara, the half of the land that I have. In the second case he says, Palga ba'ara disli, the half of the land that is to me. So Abaya says it should be the same. So, Ishtik, Rabbah was silent. Now from the fact that Rabbah was silent, Abaya wanted to deduce that Rabbah agreed with him, that it's both the same. Amar Abaya, Ana Savrei mid Ishtik, since Rabbah was quiet, Kibule Kabla, he accepted what I said, that it should be the same. However, V'lohi, he was quiet because he didn't deign to reply. Because Chazina Hanosh Tore did not give me Beimar. Rabbah was Abaya's superior. So he said, I saw the decisions that came out from the court of Rabbah. V'ksiv b'hu hachi. Palga de isli ba'ara, the half that I have in the land, that's palga. That's the full half. Palga ba'ara de isli, half of the land that I have, that's a river, that's a quarter. And that's the halacha. Wow, okay, Jay Siegel is struggling with Jay Siegel, it's good to see you on Facebook. for the future, the passcode is what is it, Rabbi say? 916408?
914408.
914408. 914408 is the passcode. 914408. There must be a simple way for me to remove it, but I'm not getting it. If after the shir, somebody wants to come on my computer and do a, whatever that's called,